welcome to Weekly Reddit. In today's episode of r/ProRevenge, I recruited an unwitting army to annoy an asshole. Renege once the job's done. Prepare for your just desserts. Mess with my Christmas? Pardon me as I ruin yours. I recruited an unwitting army to annoy an asshole. Back in the early 90s, my friend, I'll call him Lou, because that's his name, was selling his RX-7 via an ad in the old print auto trader. It came out every Thursday, so that first weekend was critical for sales. The very first guy that came to see it on Saturday said he wanted to buy after driving it. Of course, he had to finance, so they couldn't finish the sale during the weekend. Lou was worried about losing all the bites from the new ad, so he asked for a deposit of $500. The guy wrote a check. Lou told the rest of the callers that weekend that it was sold and, unfortunately, didn't ask for their numbers in case it fell through. This story predates caller ID availability in my area by a couple years, so those leads were gone. As you surely expect by now, the guy flakes on Monday and Lou deposits the check. Payment stopped. Big surprise. Sitting around my apartment, we schemed revenge, but all we had to go on was the check. Lucky for karma, there was a phone number printed on it. Our first idea was to write a little program to dial his number repeatedly from my modem, but that would be easily stopped and probably get us in direct trouble. Then Lou got a page from his work. This was back in the one-way pager days. You call the pager's dedicated phone number, it sounds a tone, then you punch digits for the number you want to be sent to the pager. The person with pager receives the number you entered and, presumably, calls it. Everyone with a pager made sure that people who needed to get a hold of them had the number for their pager. You'd see pager numbers in print and TV ads all the time for various services. Boom, angelic choir sings, heavenly light goes off. Lou's pager number and my pager number had the same prefix, middle 3 digits. What if we randomly dial numbers with that prefix and page them all to this guy's number? So we order a pizza, open some beers, and start looking through the yellow pages at locksmiths and tow truck services to find more pager prefixes. We wind up with a dozen or so. After that, it's half an hour of coding in the oldie ball and C++. I put together a program that would cycle through a list of known prefixes and add a random final 4 digits to get a random pager. It calls the pager's number, pauses, then dials this asshole's number and throws a 911 suffix on there for good measure, which is something people with pagers understood to indicate an emergency of some kind. The whole thing was just generating a string like at 602 xxx, asshole number 911 hash, where 30 is the pager prefix and yi is random. Commas make pauses, since you need to connect to the paging service before you can enter the message. Make string, send to modem, wait for no carrier, hang up, repeat. We start eating the pizza and let it fly. I was very picky about my devices, so my modem was a US robotics courier. You could set an S register to control how long it would sound each tone when dialing. Uber nerds like myself would keep tinkering with that to get it as fast as possible while still being recognized by the phone service. It was very fast. I swag it could run through 4 pages per minute, so this guy would get 240 calls an hour. We just watched it run and laughed our asses off. We realized pretty early on that we didn't really know if it was working, so we wandered down to the 7-Eleven and called him from a payphone, just in case he could somehow trace it or the popo were on the case and watching. A man answered and I said, "Hello, I got a page at this number?" I heard an audible sigh and then he just hung up. Gold. We ended up running it for a few hours, then let it go quiet for a few days. Then we scheduled it to start dialing in the middle of the night every few days, plus we'd fire it up by hand randomly whenever we had a party. We checked again from the 7-Eleven after a week and it went to an answering machine, which did the rapid tone at the end of the greeting to indicate the tape was full. We reasoned that the line was still ringing, anyway, so we kept at it for another month or so. Eventually, we got the disconnected warning when we made one of our regular checkups. I'm sure he just changed the number. I like to think about that guy answering the phone after a few days of silence when we started it up. I can vividly imagine his response at the "Did someone page me to this number?" as he slams the phone down and then it rings again a few seconds later. Or, of course, coming home from work and having an answering machine full of random people asking about being paged. And, yeah, we annoyed several thousand people into calling this guy by the end. But each of those people was only put out for a single call. A cost, yes, but a necessary one for justice. Reneg, once the job's done, prepare for your just desserts. A few years after I started my business, I was asked to clean up and optimize a number of PCs in multiple locations, as well as set up some forms and templates for a new client who owned a local restaurant. The work, all labor apart from a little travel, was performed over the space of a month due to scheduling conflicts and school holidays, but, on completing the last of it, the client confirmed verbally that he was happy with all I'd done, and to go ahead and send an invoice. I duly emailed an invoice for a sum just in excess of £400. I waited for payment, never heard anything, sent reminder emails, called and left messages, but no response. Eventually a couple of busy months had passed and I met the client by chance in the local supermarket. On asking why he'd not paid or been in touch, he said that all the PCs were as bad as they had been before I'd started, and that he had tried to contact me with no success. As my landline and mobile phone had caller display as well as answering services, and there had been no emails, I knew the latter was BS, and as any PC user knows, a system can easily go back to pot if the user bad habits don't change. So I contacted a local debt collector, gave him the details, printouts of my call logs and post-invoicing emails, and he took them to the restaurateur. On his return his words were he's not disputing the invoice. He's saying that the work wasn't done right, so it's his word against yours. I queried if it was worth taking the guy to small claims, to which the debt collector said even if you could prove he confirmed he was satisfied with the work, they might insist you get his computers back to their pre-invoice state again. Do you really want to spend more time doing that? Of course the answer was no, so I stewed it over in my mind and came up with a plan. At this point it was late November, so, creating 2 throwaway email accounts in female names, I got in touch with the restaurants to book a large party for Valentine's night the following February. I put it down as my husband's surprise 40th birthday party, confirmed that my husband's sister, and CC'd her in the message with the other throwaway, couldn't make the journey north, but would happily pay the £10/head deposit as her share towards the night. Of course, as time went on the ideas grew arms and legs. The numbers attending increased, until the owner suggested he'd reserve the whole restaurant for the evening, and they'd happily arrange the seating to suit us. But could I ensure the deposit was sorted ASAP, please? Of course I confirmed that the sister was a scatterbrain and that I'd ensure the check was with him very soon. He emailed the sister using the CC address and she confirmed it had been posted. To keep him on side, I asked for a proposed menu in advance so that I could send it to all the attendees for pre-ordering. Naturally they were delighted that they'd know this as it makes their life much easier. Consequently the numbers for all 3 courses were emailed in, with a few fussy eater variables thrown in for good measure. Needless to say by the beginning of February he was getting quite antsy about there being no sign of the deposit, but I reassured him that the sister's check must have been lost in the post, so she'd send another by special delivery, if they could ensure someone was there to sign for it. I knew the owner lived about 25 miles away, and the restaurant didn't open till 5 p.m., so he'd have to come in very early and hang around waiting for it. A week before D-Day and he'd obviously had enough. He emailed in a spat saying they turned away numerous inquiries, had no deposit, and could no longer hold back on taking other bookings. This time I didn't bother replying. My part was done. My wife, at the time, and I were booked in at another restaurant close by for our own Valentine's meal, after which we took a walk past the restaurateur's business premises to see just 2 cars in their parking lot, one of which was his. I'm not sure how much he must have lost out on that night, but knowing his prices I'd bet it was significantly more than the £400 plus I'd invoiced him. Of course lessons were learned by me too. Get written or emailed confirmation of job satisfaction for one, and not letting new clients go unbilled for too long was another. Naturally I had no hesitation letting all and sundry know how he'd behaved either, so he was blacklisted, or forced to pay up front for any work, by IT and other professionals I knew locally. Edit. Many thanks for the awards and comments all you lovely Redditors. Mess with my Christmas? Pardon me as I ruin yours. I posted this in r/entitled parents and it was suggested that you might enjoy it here. I have edited it slightly to comply with the Rule 11 for this sub. Enjoy. Too long did not read at end. This slow burn starts a full year and a half before my plan came into effect. Earlier in the year, my dad quite sensibly suggested that with the size of our family Christmas party, we skip a generation with gifts to ease the financial strain as the extended family grew. At the time I was struggling with my business and athletic career and my wife, then GF, was working on her second master's degree, so I suggested names from a hat, but he wanted to spoil all his grandchildren. I said fair enough, I'll chip in for a Mars cruise and buy gifts for my step-siblings, but don't expect anything grand. Dramatis personae for that Christmas party. Me, 28-year-old, at the time, heavyweight mixed martial artist and strength coach aka small-time athlete working a day job to barely make rent in addition to training full-time. Martha, stepsister, 40-ish, an aging mombi whose only assets are starting to sag too much for them to be assets anymore, leaving her with no other definable personality traits. Jane, my oldest niece 12, stepsister's daughter, imagine the most vapid teenager stereotype you can and multiply it by 1000. Tim, my oldest nephew 9, stepsister's son, living proof that you're never too young to be an asshole. Robert, stepbrother, 36, formerly cool dude who gave up on life when his kids were born, years later would gain back enough willpower and gumption to physically assault his wife. Tammy, 6 bro's daughter, sweet and shy girl, terrified by my mere presence, the wisest of the bunch imho. Bubba, 7 bro's son, a generally nice kid who at this time was part way into evolving into an asshole after being constantly told to look up to and emulate Thing 2. Tammy has brought a Nintendo DS and all the kids are struggling to play it together, so I foolishly offer to loan them mine to lighten the load. Tammy agrees to share with Jane, and Bubba agrees to share with Tim. Having stupidly deprived myself of my means to escape social obligations, I go to the living room to acquire that much older cure for not wanting to deal with other people, alcohol. Not even having had time to pour a dram, my trained ear picks up from the kids' room the unmistakable sound of one human being pummeling another. I politely suggest to Robert that he might want to go have a look, but bro hasn't given 2 shits about anything in about 7 years, so he waves it off and I go to investigate. I walk in to see that Tim may be an asshole, but is not untalented, and is managing to strike, shove into a wall and kick Bubba all at the same time, while attempting to play my DS with his other hand, having decided his turn began the moment I left the room. Jane has simply wrested the DS from Tammy, who is now sitting in the corner crying. I shout for Martha, informing her that if she doesn't get in here to break things up before I count to 10, I would have a stern conversation with them. She turns up and separates the kids and I retrieve my DS. Instead of giving Tim a lesson on sharing and not hitting people, she proceeds to berate Bubba, the kid who was beaten, for not simply giving up the DS to her little piece of shit and making her son look bad. Jane simply lets out a teenage sigh for the ages, and tosses the other DS into the crying Tammy. I then excuse myself from the party, thanking whatever gods may be that I don't have to provide gifts for any of those little shits. 6 months later, my firm belief in atheism is confirmed as bro calls me and this conversation ensues. Robert: hey elbow smash, while I really appreciated the gifts last year, you should really get something for the kids this year instead. Christmas is all about the children after all. Me: no, I turn up to chat with you and Dad and Omar, I really don't give two shits about the kids. Robert: that's a mean thing to say about my kids, don't you care about them? Me: you cared about them so much that at the last party, you couldn't be bothered to break up a fight where your son was being beaten bloody. Robert: Tim is a good kid, Martha said he just had a bad day. Me: he was literally beating your child. You didn't put pics on social media for a week because of the bruises. If Tim were an adult and had that kind of bad day, I'd have had a stern conversation with him and convinced him peacefully to lay on the floor until the police arrived. Robert: well, stepsis and I were talking and we think you should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of us. Me: well, I'm happy not to buy you anything, but I'm not getting crap for the Martha's little shits, especially when she encourages that behavior. Robert: well, if you aren't going to get something for all the kids, you shouldn't get anything at all. It's not right if you don't treat them equally. Me: done. Now I'm sure they wish it has been this simple, but unfortunately it wasn't, and I certainly wouldn't have written such a long-winded story if that were the payoff. Thanks for bearing with me so far, we're almost at the end. A few months later, about 2 weeks before Christmas, I get an email from my dad with links to various toys, mostly from Toys R Us, which still existed at the time. When I call him back to ask what that's all about, this conversation ensues. Me: hey, what's up? I got your email, what's that all about? Dad: those are gifts for the kids for Christmas. Me: that's cool if you're getting them that, I'll see them when the kids open them. Dad: no, that's for you to get them. Me: I don't buy for that generation, remember? And I already sent you my contribution to Omar's cruise. Dad: you need to get stuff for the kids, don't you want them to look up to you as an uncle? Me: not really. Also, what part of my life suggests to you that they ought to look up to me as any sort of role model? You'd be better off telling them to grow up to be rock stars. Dad: not the point. Christmas is about the children. If you don't get them this stuff, I won't put your name on the card for Omar. Me: that's a shitty thing to do, considering I already paid into that. Dad: will you get the stuff or not? Me: well, guess my name isn't going on the card then. This will cost me more than a month's rent, so you can take this list and grease it up real nice. Dad: interrupting, calm your jets. This is what they want. Me: I'll get them a token something, but I'm not taking out a loan. Dad: fine, just make it something they enjoy. Me: if what I get doesn't put a giant smile on each and every one of their faces, I'll buy you dinner at a steakhouse of your choosing. Dad: that's the spirit, talk to you later. So, Christmas rolls around and my wife and I have bought not just one, but 4 gifts for each of the little ones, and wrapped them all beautifully. My dad, correctly, assumes it's all probably from the dollar store, but it's nicely wrapped and he gives me a look of approval as I place it under the tree. My wife and I schmooze for a bit and then suggest that since we brought several gifts for each of the kids, why don't they open one each before dinner so they have something to do while they wait. Their parents of course agree, as it gives them more of a reason to ignore their kids and talk about them instead, so they send us off to hand out gifts to their kids. Martha is looking especially smug. As they begin to unwrap them, I prepare the camera as my wife goes for our coats. And I stick around just long enough to immortalize on film the big shit-eating grin on each of the kids' faces as they see what their gift is. Less than 1 minute later, the first blast from the air horn, Tim's gift, can be heard in the hallway clearly by my wife and I as we make our way to the elevator. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of silly string, Tammy's gift, or the 36 rainbow pack of off-brand Sharpies, Bubba's gift, ended up on he walls, but I do know they repainted the place the next month. Whether or not the pile of slap-on bracelets we got for Jane ended up on the wrists and legs of the parents as they tried to contain the other 3 will be left to the imagination, but I like to think they all ended up in the height of 80s fashion before Boxing Day. I may never know if they opened the rest of their presents. Everyone got a copy of each of the others' gifts, you know, for fairness, plus a bunch of gross and mildly inappropriate temporary tattoos. In the confusion, none of them noticed either me or my wife leaving. I'm certain at some point they did notice the pretty gold envelope addressed to the parents on the tree. Inside was a very pretty card, blank but for the following note. This was a warning shot from off the top of my head. I've got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas, E. I never bought anyone steak dinner. However, I enjoyed several more Christmases with my Oma and Dad until they passed and I stopped seeing that side of the family at all. No mention of this incident, or gifts for the kids was ever made again. Too long did not read. Entitled Stepfamily manipulate my dad into coercing me into buying each of their crotch goblins gifts even though I'm not supposed to buy for that generation. They get what they fucking deserve. What they deserve being air horns, a 36 multicolor pack of Sharpies, silly string, slap-on bracelets and a lifetime supply of mostly inappropriate temporary tattoos. Each. Edit. Thanks so much for the awards everyone, especially for my first gold. But remember, your local food bank and its recipients need help more than my post needs icons beside it. So if you enjoyed my festive tale of revenge, you'll put a much bigger grin on my face by helping out those in need and sending money to Reddit. Edit 2. Changed names at mod's request.
Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay up with the best content from Reddit.